Hello, welcome back to Shock's Talks. I'm Shakti, and today we have a book report. I finally finished Preston Dennett's Out of Body book, and this is Out of Body Exploring a Beginner's Approach. And today I'm just going to flip through the book and talk about some things that I thought were interesting. I'm going to give you a full breakdown, but instead of typing up notes and reading them, I'm just going to look at the book and talk about things that I loved from this book. And I just now got out of my energy workshop. I've been doing energy work for a couple of years with this group now. And throughout my life, I've gone in and out of different trainings and different types of energy practices, but I'm really starting to build consistency. And so I just want to give like an energy update and then get into the book. I'm also in the midst of trying to have my own out of body experiences, and I'm making a lot of progress. And so I'm going to talk about that towards the end of the episode. But for today's energy update, I just wanted to say that the big message that I just got, and hopefully it could be useful to some of you as well, is that thing we've seen in many memes and we've heard it many times before, but this is what's been coming up. It's like, don't quit now, don't give up, just keep going. And the big lesson for me was how intense the interference can become right before a breakthrough is about to happen. So much so that you really, 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 really want to quit. And your mind gets on board with it and starts coming up with all kinds of really good reasons why you should do that. And it's so compelling because our minds are geniuses. But I think what I learned and what I hope can be helpful to you too is when that's happening, when you're in that moment where you feel that pressure building, you just got to ride it out. Just get through to the other side. Don't make decisions from within that space. Don't listen to the mind during that time, and just try to keep going no matter what. Just keep going. And this could apply to a personal goal, it could apply to something at work, it could apply to just your life, you know? Um, I think it's really important to remember that on the other side of those really pressurized moments, there can be huge progress and release and reward. And like they always say, it's darkest right before the dawn. There's all these cheesy ways to sum it up, but it's such a profound and real experience when you're in the midst of it. And I just went through that myself. So just wanted to share that right off the bat. But let's talk about this book. So, what I like about Out of Body Exploring by Preston Dennett is that he is really talking about his own experiences. And if you know his work at all, he has his own YouTube channel. He covers the UFO topic. He's a researcher. He's written, I think, over 36 books. And it was only recently that I found out that he is also an out of body explorer. And so in his work, typically he is recounting other people's stories of their UFO experiences or their alien encounters. And the way that he does this is very concise and very straightforward. So once you have a sense of his personality, it's easy to like feel that and understand that as you read his stories. His recollection of his experiences in this book also are very concise and straightforward. And so if you are someone who is doing dream work or any kind of journal work, you know that when you're having meditative experiences, the energy and the thought forms can move so fast that they almost can feel stacked on top of each other, or as if they are outside of the typical time space kind of mental reality that we experience. I don't know what to call it exactly, but what I would say is that there is a typical way of organizing information that most of us are probably experiencing on a regular basis, and there are many exceptions to that. But as you work with your mind, as you go deeper into meditation, or if you're someone who has psychedelic experiences that are induced by any means, if you are someone who has a profound connection to art or music or dance or literature in a way that causes your mind to begin functioning in new and different ways, all of these things can start a snowball effect where eventually where you started in this reality as the human that you thought you were becomes so far distant from where you currently are. It's like your whole internal landscape gets this massive overhaul, and you start to experience the world in new ways. This can include more vivid colors. It can include more nuanced perception of the sound of your experience. So, like, you hear further, you hear more details, you pick up on the different textures that are happening simultaneously, and you have the ability to parse them out in your mind and understand where they're coming from. You might have more physical sensitivity as time goes on. And all of these symptoms or benefits, you could say, are a result of psychic work. So if you're digging into psi of any kind, or if you're digging into mediumship or the out of body experience, for me, it's been a combination of anomalous experiences, research, yoga, meditation, consciousness explorations of all kinds, and being an artist that has actually taken me on this path of developing greater sensitivities and greater psychic awareness over time. And it's so gradual in a way that you can feel like nothing's happening, and all of a sudden you look back and you realize, whoa, I'm a totally different person in a totally new kind of experience. So I have a feeling that this is happening to many of us right now, and eventually, even more people will be going through this internal overhaul of consciousness. And it's very exciting because it can make life a lot richer and more real. And, and at the same time, it comes with all these different challenges because as your psychic awareness develops, you also have to contend with processing more information in new ways, and that can be a little disruptive at times. So, we're all here sharing information with each other to help that process and to make sure that we have lots of other individuals to bounce these ideas around with, and that we feel safe exploring these concepts and really reflecting on our own experiences in ways that help us to move through it instead of getting a little bit derailed by that process. So, getting into Preston's book, I would say the first almost like three-quarters of the book is just him going through his experiences. And a lot of them are like a paragraph long. It's like if you woke up and wrote down a dream. And so you'll see him progressing through the beginner phases of the out of body experience, where it is very dreamlike, actually. And a lot of these things, if you just read it and you're a skeptic and you don't have a lot of awareness of this topic, and if you don't understand the extent to which this has been researched, you could read a book like this and you could probably throw it out and say, that's a bunch of silly dreams. And what are people talking about? This is delusional. It's just dreams, you know? But if you're deeper into the topic and if you understand Preston Dennett as a person, then you can conclude that actually what he's doing is he's honestly sharing his own experiences, and they're so multidimensional that they can't really easily be put into words. So the words are just a little arrow pointing in the direction of the actual experience. They're just a little snippet of what is actually going on. So if you take things too literally, I think you'll be disappointed. But if you can get all the way through this book, and it's not a long book, I think you'll feel a really profound shift within yourself, because it's towards the end that it really picks up momentum and things start to crystallize. Early on in his out of body experiences, there's a lot of moments of gaining lucidity in a dream or in kind of a visionary state where he is focusing on cultivating and maintaining that lucidity. And that's how it becomes an out of body experience. So there's a lot of attempts where he doesn't last very long. There's a lot of experiences where he gets excited and it pulls him out of it, or he just has kind of an emotional response to things. A couple important things that he pointed out that I found very interesting have to do with the desires that can manifest when you're in that first astral realm. And he talks a lot about like our own, I would call them root chakra desires. So they're rooted in safety, food, and sustenance. And then your next chakra up, the sacral, is the sexual and creative energy. And so it almost seems like when you go out of body, you might be traveling through what could be a chakra related pathway where you start low and then you move your way up. And perhaps the realms are connected to those different energy centers in us. And in order to ascend to the higher realms, we have to do some kind of not exactly purification, but clearing out of those centers. So, this is my interpretation of what I was reading, but what I recognized in his story is that he had to experiment a lot with just exercising those desires, eating, feasting, gorging, breaking things, having emotional outbursts, yelling, running, flying, flipping, jumping, sex, and all of it is just visceral, lower chakral types of energies that need to be kind of expressed to get you through up to the other levels. And I can relate to this because I've been having this happening in my dreams for a long time, where I have these meltdowns where I'm just raging or crying or yelling. I've had one of my very first dreams that I ever remember as a kid was probably an OBE, now that I think of it. And I was in a friend's house, and in the dream I just got up out of bed, but we were in the same part of the house. So that's always a clue that it might be an OBE, but there's a little bit of dream projection in the mix. And now that I've read more of other people's OBE stories, I'm understanding that actually I have been having these for quite some time. And what I need to do is focus on clarity and get myself all the way into a more lucid state. But in the meantime, it's very comforting to know that I'm well on my way. So, in this dream from childhood, I walked away from the bed that we were sleeping in towards the stairs that went downstairs. And there was almost like what looked like a Chinese food buffet laid out with all those metal containers where they have like the little fire underneath, and you take off the lid to scoop out your food. But when I looked inside, all the containers had candy, and it was like all Easter candy, which was a funny detail. But in a little kid's mind, that's like the ultimate feast, is like, I want to eat as much candy as possible. And so I remember just pulling handfuls of stuff out of that. And in Preston's recollections of some of his early experiences, a lot of it was really silly, childlike, fun stuff. Also, like one time his mom fed him these crystals that tasted like this amazing orange flavor, and it was like juicier and brighter and more delicious than anything he'd ever eaten. And sometimes he's gorging on pizza, sometimes he's running around trying to go through walls. Sometimes he can, and other times he can't. There's a lot of experimentation and play that has to happen in those early phases of the OBEs. So you're testing out all of your astral senses, so to speak, and you're learning how to gain control over them, and you're learning how to navigate. And this is something Tom Campbell talks about too. He would take a lot of the excitement out of this and bring it to a very simple, straightforward place. He would say a lot of what's going on is our own consciousness intermingling with the larger consciousness system to render experiences. And that's all that it is. So it's a spectrum of experience, and we are typically focused in our waking life. But when we take our consciousness out of waking life, and we can do that in so many different ways, we can have other experiences. And some are so visceral that the term out of body was coined and used. And now whole groups of people use that terminology to try to describe something that maybe we're not totally clear on yet, but we're working towards that clarity through experimentation. So, what it means is that you will see a whole range of different types of things going on, and that there is a personal component, just like in dreaming, where some of our own subconscious thoughts start to mingle with these other non physical consensus realities. The reason I call them consensus realities is because so many people who are traveling out of body are visiting the same places and having similar experiences. However, there are sometimes overlays that blend and blur with their own consciousness on top of that consensus reality. One of the ways that people define an OBE as opposed to a dream, it has to do with how real it feels. It has to do with turning back and looking at your body, but that's not always the case for everyone. But you can also explore the actual earth, and you can go places out of body, and you can get verifiable evidence to come back into your body and then go check that part of reality. For example, if I wanted to lay down right now and go out of body, maybe I could do an experiment where I go somewhere I haven't been in this neighborhood. I find an interesting building that is unique and identifiable. I take note of the street names. I return to my body, and then I physically get on my bike and bike down a couple streets, and I go and look at the thing that I saw out of body. These types of experiments are the things that, Tom Campbell has done. He worked on this type of stuff for 30 years. There are people who do these kinds of experiments to gather more data. However, what we're dealing with is a spectrum of psi abilities, basically, and psychic perceptions. So some people are able to get real, verifiable data in dreams. Others are able to get it through meditation. Others are able to get it through remote viewing. And this is where all of the psychic stuff becomes very interesting to scientists because on the one hand, you have the personal experiences that are just for healing and growth and personal development. And the analytical mind can easily write that off and say, oh, that stuff is just very woo woo. Everyone's just making it up. It doesn't really matter. And then on the other side of this phenomena, you have the practical applications in a drier sense. For me, both sides are equally important and exciting. Some people think the more woo woo stuff is actually really what matters, and the other stuff doesn't even matter. It's really about your soul's growth. Other people, like the US military, for example, who's interested in remote viewing, might think that we just want to capture data remotely. We want to be able to sit in a room and gather evidence without ever having to be in harm's way. And that's all that we care about. So for them, the more woo woo side doesn't matter. But what's interesting, obviously, they both matter. And what's interesting is that so many of the famous remote viewers who come through this whole career, this whole lifetime of working on this stuff, they write their books and they tell their stories, and come to find out it is the emotional, spiritual stuff that also had an impact on them as well. And everyone starts to understand that, okay, we're living in a much greater reality than we've been taught. We are connected. Our thoughts and feelings and energies absolutely do have an impact on everything. And there is no real privacy because everything is accessible through consciousness. So maybe that's a good wake up call to start living with integrity, just to at least live in a way that feels good to you, knowing that your whole record of existence is basically etched into the very fabric of the consciousness reality. That's what people call the Akashic records, the libraries. And Preston Dennett talks about this. He goes to the library. Eventually, he's able to see all these different screens. He stands in front of one and he sees all of his past lives just flashing in front of his face very quickly. Um, okay, that's a lot of thoughts about this book. As you can tell, it got me going, but I want to read you a couple things from it. So let me just resituate my position here. I find my little pages that I bent over and see what I was trying to remember. I loved this part about him doing flips because that's something that I did in a dream recently where I just realized that I could do something with my body in that dream space that was cooler than what I can do in regular reality. So I was just doing a bunch of flips, like back flips, and it felt amazing. And he talked about that too. So I thought that was really funny. see. A lot of his travels started at his father's house, and he talked about how there are familiar places that you might often go back to, which is something I do experience in dreams. I'm often in certain specific childhood homes, and then I'm going other places from there. He talks about all of his experiments on the astral plane and out of body singing, using your voice out of body. You can say your name out loud. And he said that usually produces some kind of interesting results. Bilocation. So, according to Tom Campbell, bilocation is just like splitting your awareness. Once you're really good at it, you don't even have to go fully out of body to do that. You can be sitting talking to someone with your eyes open and simultaneously in another window in your mind's eye, you're viewing their energy body and you're getting information. Listen, we're all doing this all the time. It's just some people are more hyper aware of it than others. But a great example that I always come back to is the idea of reading a book. It's the perfect metaphor to help us understand what it feels like to be out of body, but also in body at the same time, because you're in the room reading the book, but you're also in the world of the story, off having a grand adventure. And so that's a kind of form of bilocation. And that begins to show us what our consciousness is capable of, even though the type of bilocation that these guys are talking about is a little bit different. It's still a great way to get a sense of that possibility. He talks about visiting deceased loved ones, and he visits his mom a lot. That was a big goal for him, and he's had a lot of beautiful experiences with his mom. A lot of the people that I'm following who are going out of body talk a lot about the other side being a place where everyone is. So instead of like this idea that this is the main thing going on, embodied human life on Earth, it's actually the opposite. This is like a little subset of a larger reality. We come here to have a really confined experience with these special rule sets and limitations and things like that. But the true reality, the larger reality, is our home. And so when you go out there, you get to see other people. Jury's still out for me on that because I've also heard other interpretations. Like Tom Campbell will often talk about how the larger consciousness system can render for us whatever we need to experience. And sometimes, if we need to experience a deceased loved one, it will give us access to what sounds to me almost like a portion of their energy, but it doesn't mean that they didn't go on to have another life in another reality frame. So I think it can all be true. I'm starting to realize that there's like a middle ground where it's not like everyone who dies is just hovering around, hanging around, watching us live our lives. I can't really get behind that. It just seems too boring. I feel like they would be doing more. But I don't like how cold and dry Tom Campbell's interpretation is sometimes, because it feels like, you know, people are having these really profound experiences. There's got to be something to it. So I'm starting to see this middle path where maybe it's our multidimensionality that helps to explain this, where a part of us, like some people here, think of us as all having a higher self. So if my higher self is already non physical, that version of me who's playing this video game could also have avatars in multiple different video games. It could also stay non physical and be physical. It could be bilocating, it could be spreading across time and space. So I do think that the actual true nature of who we are and what we are is very vast, and the nature of reality is it's so wonderful and expansive that it leaves room for almost anything and everything to be possible. But I do think that it's fun to start looking at the anecdotal evidence, piecing together all the different stories and our own experiences to try to make sense of what's probable. So even though anything and everything could be possible, what's actually going on is what interests me the most. Some of his experiments include finding TVs, finding notebooks, finding ways to record things in the astral state, which I thought was interesting, and like changing the volume and changing the channel on TVs. He talks a lot about portals, a lot about portal travel. He goes through mirrors, he goes through doors, he goes through walls. He gets sucked into a TV, he gets immersed in these, like he'll see a screen that looks like an image, a vision of a place, but then it'll like envelop him. So there's a lot of that kind of activity reported by all kinds of different astral travelers. So that's pretty interesting. And he was able to experience some past lives. So again, if you think of this in the driest way possible, the least personal, Tom Campbell kind of way, he might say that, well, the larger consciousness system can render for you the experience of past lives to help you gain valuable insights that would affect you positively in this existence. So for example, if you are a white man like Preston Dennett, you might go out of body and you experience yourself as a black woman, for example, or as a different kind of person. He gives a couple examples of those experiences that he's had. And maybe they really were his past lives, or maybe they were just the universe showing we're all connected, we're all consciousness in these different bodies, in these forms. With each body comes a whole set of energetic constraints because we enter into an information based system where our avatar in that system is deeply related to the world around us, and it dictates the way that we're going to experience reality because we're going to be treated certain ways. We are going to exist within systems like the patriarchy, and that's going to have an impact on our soul's experience. However, beyond this system that we're currently focused within, we are all more than that, and we have all been many things. And I think that's the root of that kind of message that people get when they're having past life experiences. But I am very open to the possibility that they really are having actual past life experiences, and that each one of those is personal and meaningful, and that when you have it yourself, you gain access to something that cannot be described, but it's deep and profound and personal. And for that reason, I would love to have some past life experiences. I would love to understand who I've been in other games, in other databases, in other reality frames, on other planets, in other time periods. I would love to gain access to that. So that's one reason why I'm motivated to have the experience for myself, because no matter what it is, it's going to be interesting. And this could be said for like psychedelic experiences. For those that are still on the fence about all this and think it's pretty woo woo, just think about psychedelic experiences. They don't mean a lot to anyone outside of them, but they mean a lot to the person having them. And the things you learn and the things you gain from those types of experiences are personal and meaningful on a deep level. And they can be profound, like life changing. So I think this is another tool that life itself has given us to have profound, life changing insights and experiences that really help us to live our lives and enjoy our lives better and to connect with each other and this system in more productive ways. He talks about going to higher realms. He talks about doing some soul retrieval work, another theme that comes up across cultures, across time. Many different people doing this out of body work at some point or another have an experience with soul retrieval, either getting recruited to help other souls move to the places that they need to be, or observing a soul retrieval process. That's pretty interesting because it's so prevalent in the research and, like I said, across many different groups. And then finally, I wanted to talk about the end where he talks about psychic powers. So I'm just going to read you a little bit from the final few chapters. Okay, learning out of body travel is interesting, fun, and exciting. However, there are certain consequences. Once you get good at projecting, you may find that the experience begins to invade your waking life. While I haven't experienced anything bad or even scary, I kept confronting bizarre situations. Nobody warned me that integrating the dream state with your waking consciousness would lead to possible confusion and a bleed through between the physical and astral dimensions. Now, this part was like a big firework going off inside of me because I've been thinking about this nonstop because I have had this issue for most of my life. And it's only now at the beginning of my 40s that I'm understanding why and what's going on and how at different and God, isn't it so cool how time gives you that ability to look back and reflect? When you're in it, you're just in it and you don't know what's going on and you're just getting flipped around and spun around as if you got pulled out by a tidal wave. And then all of a sudden you get back to the shore and you look out and you can see what's going on. So I'm starting to see that I've always been a person who's had a little bit of bleed through, probably because I started meditating at the age of 5 and I was on an ashram learning esoteric things and practicing yoga at a young age. I also went through some traumas. I also had a very wild and active imagination. I was seeing things, I was hearing things. Then I learned to shut it down. Then, through more trauma and other life choices like drugs, it got blasted back on. Then I had to tamp it back down again. Kind of went through the whole mental health cycle of trying to get diagnosed and analyze and understand what was going on from that perspective. But I could never get quite the right answer or solution. So then I went back to just naturally taking care of my own energy and taking care of my body. And then I began cultivating my energetic practices again and cultivating these meditative states, and now I'm getting more bleed through again. So what I mean by that is that I see things and I hear things, and it's not all the time, but it is occasional, and every time it kind of jolts me a little bit because I'm scared. I want to be mentally stable. And so, what Preston is talking about is important because we all need to redefine what mental stability is. And we need to understand that mental stability can include extra perceptions. Everybody in the psychic community already knows this, but it's not part of regular reality yet that we're all talking about this all the time. And I hope we get there soon because I think a lot of people are coming online to these abilities, and we're going to need this grounding in a community that understands what it's like to have some visions from the other dimensions starting to enter into this reality. It's also going to help us to parse out the anomalous experiences that are based in sightings and downloads and dreams and, what's really going on with all of that. So, my research into the UFO topic is what brought me back over to wanting to dig deeper into lucid dreaming, out of body experience, and meditative and altered states because we need to understand them all to fully understand any of them, if that makes sense. So, one thing that occurred as a result of him getting into out of body experiences was precognition and more precognitive dreams. Here's a quote from Robert Peterson in Dennett's book. I had asked for out of body experiences, not psychic experiences. Somehow I had gotten them both. Somehow I was becoming psychic, whether I wanted it or not. I absolutely loved the psychic things that were starting to happen, but I started to worry about my sanity. As a skeptic, I didn't want to believe in psychic experiences. I thought it was all a load of rubbish, but in the years ahead, as I kept practicing OBEs, I also kept having psychic experiences. Most days, I would have 3 to 5 experiences I would classify as psychic. And Dennett goes on to say, this transformation was very dramatic for me too. My perception and awareness of the world completely changed. That's that internal overhaul I'm talking about. It's okay. So I had to go on antibiotics recently, and I was amazed at how it actually reset my entire gut because I usually avoid them at all costs, but I needed it. And I knew that I was going to have to like rebuild my gut lining after the antibiotics cleared everything out. And it turned out to be a blessing because I started a really nice probiotic and I started eating really light and really healthy. And all these cravings that were there before were gone. And I got to do a full system reset. And I've been building up from there. That has also cleared out my psychic abilities, weird body mind connection, but it feels like they're really working together. And when I do my energy work with my group that I practice energy work with, we're doing similar things with our energy bodies. We're cleaning and clearing our own space to make room for new perceptions and the ability to see things in a new light and to influence things more powerfully and positively. So I'm just thinking kind of out loud here, but I think what Preston is talking about is like when you start down a path of spiritual awakening through the out of body experience, you're kind of resetting your whole internal landscape. And then after that, everything changes and you see the world in a different way and you experience life in a new way. And that's pretty cool. Like, that's massive, that's because most of what we are experiencing is our own internal reality. And then part of it is what we're all sharing together, but a lot of it is coming from that internal place. So, yeah, he goes on to share a couple more experiences here, and we'll just go over. Okay, I don't want this to go too long. I'm just going to go over his steps again really quickly. Very simple. Step 1, lie down and relax your body to the point that your body begins to feel sensations of heaviness, lightness, numbness, vertigo, or vibrations. If you don't feel one or more of these sensations, you are not relaxed enough. After this point, you are nearly ready for liftoff. For me, this usually takes about 20 minutes of absolutely no movement. You should be able to relax to the point that you cannot feel your body. As you relax your body, allow the thoughts in your mind to become quiet. We all have a constant mind chatter. Turn your attention inward, away from your body and to your thoughts. Allow them to pass and to become quiet. That's the hardest part, by the way, because your thought is like a little sticky ball that like wants to grab you and pull you with it, and to let it just roll on by without getting stuck to it. That's what meditation is all about, and that can take years to cultivate, but it can also happen very quickly. So it's up to you, Some people just are good at this stuff. For others, it's harder. Either way, you can do it. And it just takes commitment over time. And I just had like such a gnarly phase with all of this where I was ready to totally give up. I wanted to delete this channel again. I'm like, why am I even doing this? I felt really bad about like 45 days of writing down my dreams and not feeling like I was progressing enough. And then I just had like a big breakthrough today. And so it's going to ebb and flow. And that's why my channel is all about learning, and it's all about the process of learning and how sometimes we lose motivation. Other times we need to switch things up a bit, look at this over here, go over there, get into the body, do some somatic learning, shake it all off, forget about it all for a while, go to the beach, just do what you got to do, come back to it. I think it's this process of learning that interests me most because through developing our own relationship to that process, we can unlock so much in this reality and in all the other layers of reality. So, his third section of how to have an OBE is about visualizing. So, it is engaging the imagination at first. Imagine, intend, desire, and remember to go out of body. See yourself existing outside your body. Imagine your astral body leaving your physical body. Firmly set your intention to have an OBE and tell yourself, I will go out of body. He gives all these different methods like vibrations, running, spinning, the boat, the rope, rolling out, elevator, the cliff, lucid dream projection. I'm not going to go into all these because I want you to get his book and read them, but you've probably heard of a lot of these. he had a fun one that he calls the flash, where he would just run. So it's like, that initial oomph, that push that it takes to get out, you use a visualization to make that happen. And then he talks about control, learning control, controlling the emotions, maintaining awareness, learning to see, learning movement, explore the physical world, visit the deceased, say your name, ask to see your higher self or God, talks about the desire body. This is kind of a recap of everything that happened before, but just in summary, like what you can do out of body. You can see your past lives. He gives a mantra that you could try that he had some strong results with, and you can use the command, take me wherever I need to go. And then there's some questions and answers at the end, which are all really valuable. And I think that the most important question that he always answers emphatically is it safe to go out of body? And the answer is yes. Or, put otherwise, like, is it dangerous to go out of body? And he says no, no, no 3 times with an exclamation point. So if you want to get those questions and answers, they're towards the end of the book, and they're all really helpful. And so he talks about really what it all means in the end here. Today, nearly 20 years of out of body experiences has taught me many things. Like most projectors, I learned early on that privacy is an illusion, which we all learned here from the remote viewing time on Shocks Talks when we were digging into that. Privacy is an illusion. I learned that the universe is far more vast than I can possibly imagine. I learned that beliefs unsupported by experience can lead to delusion and retard spiritual growth. I learned that thoughts and emotions have far reaching effects. And I learned that there is, in fact, life after death. I have learned that we are all connected in intricate ways, that everybody has out of body experiences on a nightly basis, and they just don't always remember. But most of all, I have learned that the human organism contains an apparently infinite capacity to grow and learn, which is what I was just talking about, the most wonderful thing of all. And that we all have vast untapped powers that we have only begun to explore. He also came to the conclusion that the conscious out of body experience will become increasingly more common among the general population. He says he thinks it's inevitable. And that's exactly how I feel about psychicness in general and also the OBE. So this is cool. This book was really good. I will say I I got a little bogged down in the middle because, it's just going through his experiences. And I think I was just getting jealous and restless because I want to do this so badly myself. Let me try to hold this up so I can take a picture for the cover of this episode. Ooh, here we go. There we go. Preston Dennett's book, Out of Body Exploring. Okay, you guys, I don't use AI to make my thumbnails. You've probably noticed because they're not very flashy. So thanks again to everyone who's subscribed to the channel. It means so much to me. And I just wanted to say that in my own practice right now, I'm on like day 45 of writing down my dreams. I have experimented with going off weed, bringing it back a little bit, going off alcohol, trying it, how that impacts my dreams again if I do have a drink and go out. What I've learned is that through all my experimentation so far, and it's only been a little over a month with this concerted effort, there have been other efforts that I've done in the past. But on this round right now, what I'm learning is that the most important factor is that I am well rested, but also like I need to be a certain amount of exhausted too. So I think moving my body and getting tired is helpful. Um, but also that all of the different life things like food, like diet, like weed or alcohol, they do have an impact and I notice it, but it's not prohibitive to still having interesting experiences. It changes the way things feel sometimes, but not all the time. So what I'm feeling like right now is that the number one most important thing is actually the consistency of just coming back to the practice no matter what's going on in your life. Because we can't all live a perfect monk life all the time. And I definitely can't. And I don't do well when I restrict myself too much. I kind of rebel against it. So, what I'm learning for myself is that the most important thing is that I just make a good attempt to record the experience in some way. And the dreams have been very interesting. And I've only had one powerful, fully lucid experience in the 45 days, but I am going to keep going and I will report back. I had profound experiences in my energy workshop today, and I dropped right in. I laid down for the exercise and we're listening remotely over Zoom. And I immediately felt like I was about to go out of my body. And I was just like, whoa, this is happening so fast. And I'm not even trying to do an out of body practice right now. So the energy clearing and cleansing is a really important part of it. And during that meditative state, I got a visual, and I'm always thrilled when that happens because I can see things in my mind's eye. I say I see it, but it's not visual. It's more like a an understanding of a shape, as if you could feel the shape or you kind of know what it is. So you could describe it, you could draw it, you could write it down, but you're not seeing it like a dream image or like a movie in your mind. You're just sensing it. But lately, because of all that I'm doing, I'm getting more actual visuals. And today I had two very strong ones during the energy workshop where I saw something and I didn't make it up. It just happened. It flashed across my mind and then it fades. It's very interesting when that happens. So I've also been having more experiences of seeing that with my eyes open. And that's the thing that sometimes freaks me out a little bit, but I'm going with it because I've been cultivating this and I'm in a grounded place, I'm in a stable place, and I'm allowing myself to have that visual experience come back online and the auditory part as well. It is something that scared me when it first started happening in my life, but and it still jolts me, like I said, but the universe is very seems to be very loving and supportive in the sense that it's not forcing that on me, but it understands that I want more. So it's giving me little tastes and measuring my response. And then I'm getting an opportunity to deal with my own response and to bring down my fear. And I'm very grateful for that. So I expect a lot more to be popping off soon with all the effort that I'm putting forward. And I'll definitely keep you posted. If you want to be a part of this anomalous study hall, just subscribe. It's totally free. And I appreciate all of your positive and respectful comments. So keep them coming. Thanks, everybody. See you next time on Shocks Talks.